Hey everyone! Welcome to Bedtime, Historian Sleepy. If you're listening from somewhere quiet in the US, maybe stretched out after a long day, lights low, phone face down on the table, I'm really glad you're here. This channel isn't about racing through history or keeping your brain busy. It's about slowing things down, letting the past move gently at a pace that gives your mind permission to rest. Okay? And your body permission to relax. London has a way of swallowing its own history. Walk down the Old Witch today, past the curved sweep of grand Edwardian buildings, past Australia House with its bronze statues and Portland stone, and you'd never guess what used to stand here. You'd never guess that beneath your feet, paved over and forgotten, lies the ghost of one of London's most dangerous, most colorful, most strangely alive neighborhoods. Here's what it was like to survive. It's Wych Street in the late 1700s. Wherever you're listening from tonight, I'd love to know. Drop a comment with your corner of the world and what time it is there. Hey! And if you enjoyed drifting off to stories of forgotten places, a subscribe would mean a lot. But for now, just settle in. Sink a little deeper into your pillow. Pull the covers up, because where you're going, there are no clean sheets, no warm beds, no comfort at all. Really just survival. The year is 1783. You're 14 years old. You've just arrived in London. Not by choice, exactly. Your father died last winter. Consumption the village couldn't support. Another mouth without a man's wages attached. So your mother did what thousands of mothers did in Georgian England. She found you an apprenticeship, 7 years of labor, in exchange for a trade, a bed, and enough food to keep you breathing. The coach drops you at the Strand. You've never seen so many people in your life. Back home, everyone knew everyone. Here, thousands of faces rush past without a single glance in your direction. Carts rattle over cobblestones. Sellers cry their wares. Somewhere nearby, a man shouts about the end of days, while another loudly haggles over the price of eels. The smell hits you before anything else. Not one smell, hundreds of them. It's layered and competing. Horse dung, obviously. The streets are thick with it. Beneath that, something sweeter and more rotten. Open sewers running down the middle of lanes. Cesspits beneath houses seeping through brick and mortar. The acrid bite of coal smoke hangs in the air like fog dot, and people, thousands upon thousands of unwashed bodies pressed together in a city that barely has room to breathe. Your eyes water. Your stomach lurches. Welcome to London. The address your mother wrote on that scrap of paper leads you off the Strand, past a church called St. Clement Danes, and into a narrow lane that seems to swallow the light. This is Wych Street. And even by London standards, it's something else. The buildings lean over you. Lean upper floors jutting out so far they nearly touch across the street. These are Elizabethan houses, some of them 200 years old, built when nobody cared about things like building codes or structural integrity. Their timber frames have warped and settled. Their plaster has cracked and fallen away. Their windows are clouded with generations of grime, but they're still standing somehow. Crammed with life, you find the carpenter's shop about halfway. Down, a weathered sign creaks in the breeze, barely readable. The door is propped open despite the cold. Inside, a man bends over a workbench, shaving curls of wood with a plane. He doesn't look up when you enter. You, the boy. You confirm you're the boy? He sets down his plane and studies you for a long moment. He's maybe 40, which makes him old by the standards of this neighborhood. His hands are scarred and calloused. His apron is stiff with wood, dusting what might be dried blood from a slipped chisel. Show me your hands. You hold them out. He turns them over, examines your fingers, your palms, the strength of your grip. Soft, he says. Village? Soft? We'll fix that. Okay, just like that, your new life begins. The workshop sits on the ground floor. Above it, 2 cramped rooms where the master carpenter lives with his wife and 3 surviving children. The other 4 are in the churchyard. Fever took them. It's just something that happens here. Your sleeping space is in the workshop itself. Okay, pallet of straw in the corner, covered with a blanket that might once have been wool but has been worn down to something thin and scratchy. At night, you share this space with the other apprentice, a boy named Will, who's been here 3 years already. Will gives you the lay of the land that first night. Don't go out after dark, he says. Not alone, not ever. Why not? He looks at you like you've asked why fire is hot. The footpads will have your throat cut before you can scream. And even if they don't, the watch might take you for a thief and throw you in Newgate anyway. Better to stay inside. Just keep your head down. Footpads, you learn, are what they call muggers here. The narrow streets and dark alleys make perfect hunting grounds. The overhanging buildings create shadows within shadows. A man can step out of a doorway, stick a knife in your ribs, strip you of anything valuable, and vanish into one of 100 winding passages before anyone hears you fall. What about the watch, you ask? Will laughs. Not a pleasant sound. The watch is useless. Half of them are drunk. The other half are in on it. You're beginning to understand that you haven't just come to London. You've come to a particular kind of London that exists in the cracks and shadows. Hey, a London the grand houses on the Strand pretend doesn't exist, even though it's right behind them. Which street is the spine of this world? Hell. Street, running parallel just to the left, is its beating heart. On your second day, the master sends you out for supplies. Nails, he says. Ironmonger on Hell Street. For God's sake, come straight back. You step into the morning. Chaos. Wych Street is narrow, maybe 12 feet wide at its widest point, sometimes less. The buildings crowd in on both sides, turning it into a canyon filled with people. Costermongers push carts of vegetables. Hawkers sell everything from pins to puppies. A man with a dancing bear on a chain collects pennies from open-mouthed children. An old woman squats in a doorway selling sprigs of lavender that do absolutely nothing to cover the smell. You turn onto Hell Street. It's even darker here. The buildings hang so far over the road that barely any light reaches the ground, but the shadows are alive with commerce. Shop after shop, crammed into every available inch. Old clothes shops, mostly Jewish traders selling second-hand coats, and breeches to anyone with a few coins further down. The bookshops. Some sell what you'd expect: religious pamphlets, political tracts, the occasional novel for ladies with leisure to read. Others arrange their windows with careful ambiguity, suggestive title pages, illustrated covers that make your ears burn. You're 14. What you don't know yet is that Hell Street will one day be called the vilest street in the civilized world by the Times. More than 50 shops selling what polite society calls obscene materials, erotic novels, illustrated guides, things never discussed in your village church. But that's later. Right now, you're just a confused apprentice looking for an ironmonger. You find it, hand over the coins, collect your nails, and then, because you're 14 and curious, you take a slightly longer route back. That's when you discover the taverns. They're everywhere. The Rising Sun, the Black Lion, the George, the Crown and Anchor. Every few doors, another place offering ale and gin and company to anyone with pennies to spend. Even at this hour, they're busy. Men spill into the street, tankards in hand, laughing and arguing, and occasionally throwing punches. At the Crooked Billet, a woman in a stained dress stands on an overturned crate, belting out a song with lyrics. that make your face burn, the crowd loves it. Coins rain into a basket at her feet. This is Wych Street. This is your new home. A place where upper floors nearly touch across streets so narrow a man could shake hands with his neighbor without leaving. His window, where buildings are older than memory survivors of the Great Fire of 1666, where shadows hide everything from romance to robbery, where taverns never close and songs are never polite. You hurry back to the workshop. The master doesn't ask why you took so long. Maybe he knows. Maybe everyone who comes to Wych Street takes that extra walk just to understand where they've landed. He puts you to work immediately, sanding. Always sanding at first. Your hands blister within days. The blisters burst. Then they blister. Again, eventually, the skin toughens into something leather-like. Your palms lose their softness. Your fingers learn the grain of wood. Weeks pass, then months. You start to understand the rhythms of the street. Vendors rise before dawn to claim the best spots. Morning brings a tide of humanity flowing toward the Strand and Fleet Street, toward courts and counting houses where the city does its respectable business. And evening is when Wych Street truly comes alive. The theaters open, the Olympic, the Globe rebuilt on the site of the old Lions Inn after someone decided culture was more profitable than law. Smaller venues compete for pennies. Playgoers flood the streets, some heading for the stage, others for the brothels clustered just beyond the light. And somewhere among them, you're learning how to survive. The smell of tobacco and spilled beer mixes with whatever's cooking in the dozens of food stalls that spring up after dark. Oysters, fried fish, hot potatoes, meat of questionable origin, shaped into pies and sold for a penny apiece. You learn to move through this chaos without drawing attention, to keep your money in your boot rather than your pocket, to walk with purpose, never dawdling, never making eye contact with strangers. You begin to recognize the different types who frequent these streets. The working monotonous enough, if sometimes rough, the criminals who carry themselves with a relaxed confidence. The prostitutes, some barely older than you, working the corners and tavern doors that the gentlemen slumming it for the thrill-easy targets for pickpockets. You learn who to trust. Will becomes something like a friend. He teaches you the shortcuts through neighboring alleys, the best places to buy food, which taverns water their beer and which serve it straight, which shopkeepers will extend credit hand, which will have you thrown into debtor's prison for an unpaid farthing. The master carpenter is hard but fair. He hits you sometimes when you make mistakes, but no harder than he hits Will, and he makes sure you're fed. His wife slips you extra bread when she can. Their children, 2 girls and a boy, watch you with curious eyes but never speak. This is life on Wych Street, cramped, dirty, dangerous, but also alive in a way your village never was. Back home, every day was the same. Here, every day is a small adventure. A fire in a nearby chimney brings the whole street running with buckets. A public execution cart passes through on its way to Tyburn. The condemned man either weeping, laughing, or staring straight ahead with empty eyes. A brawl spills out of a tavern. Men rolling in the filth while the crowd cheers. A traveling performer appears with a trained monkey that picks pockets while its master distracts. You're starting to settle in. Starting to feel like you might survive this. Then one evening in your 6th month, you see something that changes everything. You're in the workshop alone, Will's gone to run an errand. The master is upstairs with his family. We're working by candlelight, finishing the sanding on a chair leg that needs to be perfect by morning. Through the window, you see someone slip out of the building across the street. He's young early 20s, maybe. Small, slight, with a boyish face that makes him look younger than he is. He moves with easy confidence, like someone who knows exactly where he's going. What's strange is how he moves. Not through the door, but through a second-floor window. He drops onto a narrow ledge, catches himself, then swings down to the street with the grace of a cat. He sees you watching for a moment. Your eyes meet. He grins, tips an invisible hat, and vanishes into the darkness of Hell Street. You don't know it yet, but you've just seen one of the most famous men in London. His name is Jack Shepherd. He was apprenticed to a carpenter, just like you, only streets away from where you're standing now. But unlike you, he didn't stick with the trade. Fell in love with a woman who worked the streets. Fell in with thieves. Fell into a career of burglary that's making him the talk of every tavern in the city. By next year, he'll escape from Newgate Prison twice locked in irons, chained to the floor-picking locks, breaking chains, scaling walls, and somehow walking free again and again. Even his enemies will admire his nerve. Daniel Defoe will write his biography. Crowds will pay just to see him in his cell. 200,000 people will line the streets on the day of his hanging, many of them weeping. But right now, he's just another young man disappearing into the dark, trying to survive Wych Street. By whatever means necessary, you turn back to your sanding. The candle burns low. Outside, the sounds of evening continual laughter from a tavern. A woman shouting in the street, the distant clatter of a coach on the Strand. You're a long way from home, but you're starting to think you might belong here. Sleep comes on the hard pallet in the corner of the workshop. Let the sounds of Wych Street fade into the background. Hum they become when you're too tired to notice them. Tomorrow, there'll be more sanding, more learning, more survival, and just outside your door, a whole world of thieves and poets and pornographers and dreamers living and dying and loving and scheming in streets so narrow the sun barely reaches the ground. This is your London now. Rest your eyes. Let go. Tomorrow is another day in the slum. Winter comes too. Wych Street like a thief. One morning you wake up and the cold has seeped into your bones through the thin blanket, through the straw pallet, through whatever warmth your body managed to hold overnight. The workshop has no real heating, just a small iron stove, the master lights on the coldest days, burning scraps of wood too small to use for anything else. You huddle near it when you can, but there's work to be done, and the master doesn't care if your fingers are numb. You learn to keep moving. Sawing warms you up. Planing warms you up. Even sanding, if you do it fast enough, creates enough friction to keep your hands from going stiff. Will teaches you a trick. Rub your hands with lard before bed. It keeps the skin from cracking. The master's wife gives you a bit from the kitchen. You smear it on every night, ignoring the smell, grateful for anything. That stops the bleeding dot. But the real enemy isn't the cold, it's the fog. London fog is something else entirely. Back in your village, fog meant a morning mist that burned off by noon. Here, it comes and stays days at a time, sometimes weeks. It rolls in from the Thames, mixing with smoke from 100,000 coal fires, creating something that barely qualifies as air dot. They call it a pea souper. It's yellow-green and thick enough that you can barely see your hand in front of your face. It gets into everything: your clothes, your lungs, your food. You cough constantly. So does everyone else. It's the sound of London in winter is the sound of a city hacking its lungs out. Everything becomes slick and greasy. Walls, cobblestones, skin. The fog leaves behind a film of soot and coal. Dust on every surface. wealthy women stop wearing white altogether. What's the point? It'll be gray within the hour. The fog makes the streets more dangerous. You can't see who's coming. Can't see who's behind you? The footpads love it. Will tells you about a man who got lost last year. Walked straight into the Thames. They found his body 3 days later near the docks. He'd lived in London his whole life, but the fog turned familiar streets strange, and he walked right off the edge of the world. You stick close to the buildings now, trail your fingers along. The walls count your steps. Anything to keep your bearings in that yellow murk. And then there's the mud. Calling it mud is generous. Which street is paved sort of, with cobblestones shifted and cracked by centuries of use. Between them, packed earth turns to slush in the rain. On top of that, horse dung, rotting vegetables, human waste tossed from chamber pots, dead animals. And whatever else 300,000 people produce every day. It all churns together into something black, slick, and foul-smelling like death having a bad day. It's everywhere, inches deep in the road, splashing onto your clothes whenever a cart rattles past. Rich people ride in sedan chairs, carried above the filth. The middling sort hire link boys to light the way and sweep a path. But you wade through it like everyone else. Your shoes are permanently stained. Your stockings are a lost cause. One morning in December, a master sends you to deliver a finished cabinet to a customer on the Strand, a wealthy merchant. Don't get it dirty, the master says, and don't let anyone see you coming. From this direction, you understand? You do. The merchant doesn't want his fine furniture associated with the stink of Wych Street. So you take the long way around, skirting the edge of the slum, approaching the Strand from a respectable angle. The merchant's house is another world: clean windows, polished brass. A servant takes the cabinet without meeting your eyes, as if you're not quite a person, just a delivery mechanism with legs. You're back on Wych Street. By noon, the master gives you a whole shilling for your trouble, and because you have a penny to spare, and the cold gnawing at your bones, you decide to spend it at a coffee house. The George Inn sits on a side street just off Wych Street proper. It's been there since 1723. Originally a coffee house, though they serve ale and wine now too. It's a step up from the rough taverns of place for business, for reading newspapers passed from table to table. You've walked past it 100 times. Today, you go in. Warmth hits you first. A real fire in a real fireplace. The smell of coffee, tobacco smoke, roasting meat, the hum of conversation, men talking politics, trade. A gossip. You find a corner seat and order a dish of coffee. It costs a penny, but it buys you the right to sit by the fire as long as you like. The coffee is bitter and strange. You've never had it before, but it's hottened. It wakes you up in a way ale never does. You start to understand why the wealthy love the stuff. You sit, you listen. The men are a mixed lot. Some are gentlemen or trying to look like it. Clean coats, powdered wigs. It's the careful speech of people who want you to know they've been educated. And for the first time, you realize there's more to London than survival. There's possibility too. Others are tradesmen like your master, here to make contacts or close deals. And others still are harder to place men with watchful eyes and careful smiles, who could be anything from merchants to criminals or both. He's older, heavy-set, sitting alone at a table piled with papers and books, muttering to himself as he writes. Every few minutes he looks up, scowls at the room like it's personally offended him, then goes back to work. The serving girl catches you staring. That's Mr. Johnson, she says. The dictionary man uses this place as his office. Gets his letters sent here and everything. Samuel Johnson. You've heard the name, even in your village, people. Knew about the dictionary, the great project to capture the entire English language in a single book. Years of work. Thousands of pages. The achievement of a lifetime. And here he is, in a coffee house off Wych Street, scratching away at whatever he's working on now, looking like he hasn't slept in a week. You watch him for a while. The way he crumples pages and tosses them aside. The way he mutters and curses under his breath. It's the way he calls for more coffee without looking up. So this is what genius looks like. Tired, grumpy, sitting in a corner of a coffee house, trying to make words do what he wants them to do. Another man enters, well-dressed, friendly smile. He carries himself with the ease of someone comfortable everywhere he goes. "Mr. Johnson," he says, approaching the table. "A pleasure, as always." Johnson looks up. His scowl deepens. "Perfect. What do you want?" Perfect, Johnson." Repeats Henry Perfect. You'll learn more about him later. How he was born to a clerical family, trained for the church, but found the life of a con man more suited to his talents. How he dresses as a vicar and talks his way into respectable homes. It's charming old ladies out of their savings with tales of charitable causes that don't exist. Right now, he's playing his part perfectly. Smooth voice, trustworthy face. He sits across from Johnson and talks about a literary project he claims to be funding. Johnson isn't buying it. You can tell from the narrowing of his eyes. From the way his hand stays on his purse. "I have work to do, Mr. Perfect." "Good day." Perfect smiles, not offended at all, and moves on to another table. Another mark. The game never stops for men like him. You finish your coffee and step back. Into the cold dot, the serving girl's words stay with you. Gets his letters sent here. You realize that for men like Johnson, the coffee house isn't just a place to drink. It's an office. It's a meeting room. A postal address dot in a city where half the population can barely afford a room. Let alone a proper house. These places become something like home. You've learned something today. These streets aren't just full of footpads and prostitutes. They're full of geniuses and con men and everyone in between. It's the high and the low, rubbing shoulders in cramped rooms. Breathing the same foul air. Spring comes eventually. The fog lifts, the mud dries sort of, and your apprenticeship begins. To feel less like survival and more like education. The master takes you out on jobs now. Real jobs. Installing cabinets in houses across central London. Fitting doors and window frames. Repairing furniture for people who can't afford to replace it. You see how the other half lives? Townhouses in Mayfair. With high ceilings and expensive wallpaper. Counting houses in the city full of stern clerks and mountains of ledgers. Great. Aristocratic homes glimpsed through servants. Entrances as you haul in your tools, and you see how the very bottom lives too. One job takes you past the edge of St. Giles. The Rookery, they call it. If Wych Street seemed rough when you arrived, St. Giles is something else entirely. The houses here aren't just cramped, they're collapsing. Walls held up by stubbornness alone. Roofs patched with scraps scavenged from anywhere they could be found. Entire families live in single rooms, sometimes in cellars, sometimes in spaces you wouldn't keep a dog. The smell is beyond description. Open sewers run through the streets. Cesspits overflow into basements. The dead are sometimes left where they fall because nobody can afford to bury them. This is where people end up when they have nowhere else to go. Irish immigrants fleeing famine. Families broken by debt, drink, or disease. Criminals who need. A place where even the watch won't follow. You hurry past. Keep your head down. Clutch your tools close. On the way back, You pass through the old legal quarter. This stretch of Wych Street feels different, quieter, more respectable, if that word means anything here. The Inns of Chancery stand nearby, or what's left of them. Lion's Inn, New Inn, names that once meant something in earlier centuries. These were places where young men from good families studied the law, boarding in grand buildings, preparing for careers in the courts. New Inn was where Thomas More was educated before he became Lord Chancellor, before he fell out with Henry VIII, before they cut his head off on Tower Hill. The man who wrote Utopia learned to argue and reason just yards from where you're standing now, but that was long ago. By your time, the inns have degenerated. The grand buildings are subdivided, crammed with lodgers who have nothing to do with the law. Gamblers, swindlers, men who'd rather not be found. A historian will later write that the area between Wych Street and Hell Street witnessed scenes of the most disgraceful and infamous character. He won't be wrong, but there's history mixed in with the disgrace. Layers of London stacked on top of each other. Respectable past and disreputable present sharing the same crooked walls. Back on Wych Street, you feel almost grateful. A roof that doesn't leak too badly. Food most days. Honest work even, if it's hard. That night, lying on your pallet, you think about how close these worlds are. Few hundred yards from the Strand to St. Giles, from wealth to desperation. And Wych Street sits right in the middle. Neither one thing nor the other. A boundary zone where anything is possible and nothing is safe. Summer brings visitors. Wych Street has always attracted a certain kind of person writers. Mostly, the cramped buildings, crooked streets, and colorful characters make good material. You start to recognize them, wandering through with notebooks, scribbling observations, looking at poverty like a curiosity rather than a condition. One of them stops to talk to you. He's young, maybe intense eyes, the hungry look of someone who hasn't quite made it yet but desperately wants to. "You work here?" he asks. In the carpentry shop, you say, "What's it like living in a place like this?" You're not sure how to answer. It's like trying to breathe through a wet rag while people steal from you and buildings fall down around your ears. But it's also home now, or the closest thing you have. It's all right, you say. You get used to it. He writes something in his notebook, thanks you, and moves on. You'll never know his name. But years later, when a book called Bleak House comes out and people talk about how perfectly it captures the dark heart of London, you'll wonder if that young man found what he was looking for on these streets. Autumn brings your first reel. Trouble, you're returning from a delivery late in the evening? The master kept you working past dark and impatient. Customer, now you're hurrying through streets that grow dangerous as the sun sets. You hear footsteps behind. Will's advice echoes in your head. Don't look back. Don't run. You speed. Up anyway, so do the footsteps. A hand grabs your collar and yanks you into an alley. There are two of them, rough-looking. One holds a knife that catches faint light from a window above. Your money. Now you hand it over. The few coins you earned this week. Everything you own in the world, they take your hat to. Shove you into the wall hard enough to knock the wind out of you. Then they're gone, melting into the dark like they were never there. You sit in that alley for a long time, waiting for your heart to stop pounding. This is what they warned you about, but here's the thing. You're still alive. You still have your tools. You still have your apprenticeship. On Wych Street, that counts as a good outcome. You pick yourself up, brush off your clothes, walk the rest of the way home with your head up, even though you're shaking inside. The master doesn't ask about the missing hat. Maybe he knows. Maybe everyone just knows. At dinner, Will passes you an extra piece of bread. Says nothing. You eat it slowly, watching the candle burn down. Listening to laughter and shouting and faint music from the street. Tomorrow, you'll start over. Save your coins again. Learn to watch your back better. That's all anyone does here. Survive one day at a time. One narrow street at a time in the cramped and dangerous and strangely beautiful heart of old London. Close your eyes now. Let the sounds fade. Tomorrow's another day. Real tools now. Not the sanding blocks and scraps you've been working with. A proper set of chisels worn, but sharp passed down from an apprentice who didn't make it. Fever took him, same as the master's children. Same as a lot of people around here. You don't ask whose they were. You just take them, keep them clean, learn to use them like extensions of your own hands. The work changes after that. More precise. More skilled, you're not just smoothing surfaces anymore. You're cutting joints, fitting panels, shaping wood into something that might actually be beautiful if you do it right. Will finishes his apprenticeship that spring. 7 years served in full. Now he's a journeyman carpenter with the right. To take paying work on his own, he could leave. Find a shop somewhere else. Maybe even save up enough to become a master one day. Where would I go? Says, this is home. He rents a room above one of the taverns on Holywell Street. The ceiling sags in the middle. The floorboards creak with every step. Rain gets in through gaps around the window frame, but he pays his own rent and answers to no one, which counts. For a lot in a place like this, from Will's window, can see straight down into the heart of Hell Street's famous book trade. You'd notice the bookshops before hard not to, but you never really understood what was happening inside them until Will explains it. See that one 3 doors down? He says. With the crescent moon sign, you see it? It's an old shop. The oldest on the street, according to Will. A golden half moon hangs above the door. Painted with a face pouty lips, thick eyebrows, expression that suggests it's seen things it would rather forget. That's been there longer than anyone. Can remember, Will says, selling books the whole time. But not just any books. You've heard rumors. Everyone on these streets has heard rumors. Will lays it out plain. The respectable booksellers deal in religious texts, political pamphlets, the occasional novel standard fare. Nothing to raise an eyebrow, but mixed in among them, hidden behind innocent storefronts, a different trade flourishes. Erotic literature, illustrated guides to activities your village vicar would choke on his communion wine just thinking about. Pamphlets attacking the government in terms that could get a man thrown in prison. Heretical religious texts that question everything from the divinity of Christ to the existence of God himself. All of it technically illegal, all of it selling like hot bread on a cold morning. How do they get away with it, you ask? Will shrugs. Who's going to stop them? The magistrates? Half of them are customers, the church. They'd have to admit they know what's in there, and nobody wants to do that. You watch a gentleman in a fine coat slip into the shop with a crescent moon. He's inside for 10 minutes. He comes out with a package wrapped in brown paper, tucked under his arm like it contains nothing more scandalous than cheese. And the thing is, it's not just about dirty books. Will explains that too. A lot of what gets sold on Holywell Street started as something else entirely. Political writing, radical ideas. The kind of thinking that got people killed in Franshand could get them killed here too. The wrong person was listening. The publishers on this street have been mixing sedition with pornography for generations, hiding dangerous thoughts behind titillating covers if the authorities come looking for revolutionary pamphlets. All they find is smut, and nobody wants to admit they were buying smut.clever. Dangerously clever. You file it away. A key, walking past the bookshops with your eyes forward. You're not interested in that kind of trouble. What you are interested in is music. There's a shop at number 26 Wych Street. Musical instruments, flutes mostly, but also clarinets, pianos, anything a person with money and musical ambition might want. The sign above the door reads N Company. You've passed it 100 times. Heard instruments being tested in side scales and arpeggios drifting into the street like ghosts. One day, you stop to watch a craftsman in the window, carefully shaping the body of a flute with tools not so different from your own. The owner's son works the counter most days, young fellow. Thick German accent, always smiling. His name is John or Johann. If you catch him tired and he slips back into his own tongue, you strike up a conversation. One afternoon, you're delivering a cabinet nearby and you stop to admire a piano in the window. Beautiful. You say yes? John says. English make very popular now. You ask how much something like that costs. He names a figure that would take you 3 years to earn. Then he grins. But for listening is free. He says Anne sits down to play a few bars of something you don't recognize. Something complicated and light. His fingers move over the keys like it's the easiest thing in the world. You listen until you have to go. What you don't know, what nobody on this street knows yet's that John isn't going to stay here. He's got plans. America, he says. Though he doesn't say it to you. A brother in New York with a butcher shop. Another brother in London making instruments. And John, the youngest, dreaming of something bigger. Within the year, he'll be gone sailed to Baltimore with a cargo of flutes and a head full of ambition. He'll make his fortune not in music, but in furs, trading pelts with native hunters in the northern wilderness. Then another fortune in opium shipped to China. Then another in New York real estate. By the time he dies, John Jacob Astor will be the richest man in America, the first multimillionaire. And it will all have started here. In a cramped little shop on Wych Street, selling flutes to Londoners who couldn't have imagined where that awkward German boy would end up. But that's the future, right now. He's just another young man trying to make his way, same as you. The theaters pull you in eventually. You've heard about them. Of course, Wych Street is thick with performance venues from the grand to the grubby. But apprentices don't have money for theater tickets. And even if you did, the master would tan your hide for wasting it. Still, there are ways. Stage doors open onto back alleys. If you time it right, you can catch the tail end of a performance by lurking near an exit. The sound carries laughter, gasps. Sometimes a door is propped open and you glimpse painted scenery. Actors in costume. The impossible magic of people becoming other people right before your eyes. The Globe Theater sits where lions used to stand. It's the third theater to carry that famous name, though it has nothing to do with Shakespeare's original. Some developer decided knocking down a law school and putting up a playhouse. 'Twas progress. Maybe he was right. The lawyers who studied here were already gone, replaced by gamblers and drifters. At least, the theater brings in paying customers. Word? Is there planning another theater down the street? The Olympic, they'll call it. Someone has already bought the old Drury house site and started clearing it. The rumor in the taverns is they'll build it from the timbers of a French warship. Captured during the wars, whole theater made from enemy wood. Only in London would someone think that was a selling point? Across the street, Shakespeare's Head Tavern does a roaring trade before and after performances. The name is a bit of cheek, linking itself to the famous playwright. Even though he never set foot in this establishment, but nobody cares about accuracy when there's money to be made. Late one night, you stumble onto something remarkable. You're coming back from a delivery that ran long. The streets are quiet by Wych Street standards, which means only a dozen drunks instead of 100. You're passing the Shakespeare's Head. When you hear laughter inside, not normal tavern laughter, something more sustained, more organized. You peek through the window. A group of men sits around a large table drinking, arguing, clearly having the time of their lives. They're well-dressed, writers and artists and editors by the look of them. It's the kind of people who stay up all night because the ideas won't stop coming. Someone notices you watching and waves you in. You shouldn't. The master expects you back. But something about the scene is too interesting to resist. Inside, the air is thick with tobacco, smoke, and clever conversation. A man at the head of the table holds forth on the state of English literature, gesturing with a pipe that scatters. Ash everywhere. Others interrupt him, disagree with him, buy him drinks to make him shut up. The Club of Owls. Someone explains when you ask. We keep late hours, hence the name. You have no idea what any of them are talking about. Philosophy, politics, the proper way to structure a sonnet. It's all Greek to you on. Some of it might literally be Greek. For all you know, but you listen anyway. Nursing a single ale, someone presses into your hand. Watching these men argue about ideas. Like ideas are the most important thing in the world. One of them a younger fellow with ink stains on his fingers. What you do? Carpenter's apprentice down the street, you say. He nods as if that's perfectly reasonable. Honest work, he says. More than most of us can claim. Years later, you'll learn that man went on to edit a magazine called Punch, that he lived upstairs from this very tavern for a while, surrounded by the chaos of Wych Street, writing satire that would make emperors uncomfortable. But tonight, he's just another dreamer. Drinking too much, talking too fast, trying to figure out what kind of man he wants to be. You slip out before anyone expects you to say anything clever. Back to the workshop, back to reality. But something's shifted. You've seen behind the curtain. It's just a little dot seen that the world isn't divided cleanly into rich and poor, respectable and criminal. There's another category of people, two people, who live by their minds. People who trade in words and ideas instead of goods and services. And they're Haran, your street, shrinking in your taverns. Your world is bigger than you thought. The year turns, 1786 becomes 1787. Your apprenticeship enters its middle phase. The work grows harder in some ways, easier in others. Harder because the master expects more. Easier because you finally know what you're doing. Your hands have learned the language of wood. You can look at a piece of oak and see the grain. Know where it wants to be cut. Anticipate how it will behave when you shape it. The street changes too. Some shops close, others open. The usual churn of any neighborhood. But Wych Street has a way of staying the same even as everything transforms. The buildings still lean. The alleys still stink. The pickpockets still prowl. One morning you wake to shouting in the street. That's not unusual. People shout all the time around here, but this sounds different. Organized. A crowd gathering? Growing. You push your way outside.